The small velvet box felt lighter than air, yet heavier than my entire world. It was supposed to be a gift, a sign of love for our 10th wedding anniversary. But when I opened it, I couldn't breathe. Inside was a tiny silver charm. Not just any charm, it was shaped like the syringe the police said was used on my son the night he died. It wasn't just similar. It was the exact one. I knew it instantly because I had seen it in the evidence photos before it mysteriously disappeared from the police station. I looked up at my husband, David, and for the first time in my life, I saw no trace of the man I once loved. His smile wasn't warm. It was taunting. "You should have known," he whispered. It was never an accident. My hands shook. My knees nearly gave way. The restaurant faded from my sight. The flowers, the music, the soft clink of wine glasses, all of it blurred into a dull roar in my head. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leap across the table and claw the truth out of him. But all I could do was stare. And that's when I realized the truth was much, much worse than I had ever imagined. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, and until recently, I thought I had the perfect life, or at least something close to it. David and I met when I was 25. He was charming, smart, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the room. We got married 2 years later. Our first and only child, Ethan, came into our lives 5 years after that. Ethan was my sunshine. He had David's deep brown eyes, but my smile. He loved building Legos on the living room floor and had a habit of leaving his half-finished creations on the coffee table, proudly explaining each one as if it were a skyscraper in New York City. I thought we were happy. I thought we were safe. But life has a way of tricking you into believing the fairy tale right before it rips it away. It started subtly. David began staying late at work more often. When I asked, he said his company had landed a big client. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Then came the secretive phone calls he'd take in the garage. The sudden bursts of anger over small things. The nights he came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I told myself it was stress. That we'd been married long enough to hit a rough patch, and we'd get through it. But then the night happened. It was a rainy Thursday in March. Ethan had been feeling sick that week. Fever, cough, and a strange rash spreading on his arms. I had taken him to the pediatrician twice, but they said it was likely a viral infection. David volunteered to stay home with him that evening while I ran to the pharmacy for some medicine. When I got back, the house was silent. Too silent. I called for Ethan. No answer. Then I saw David in the kitchen, calmly washing a glass, as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Where's Ethan?" I asked, my voice rising. "In his room," he said without looking up. But Ethan wasn't in his room. He was in the hallway lying on the floor, not breathing. I screamed his name, dropped to my knees, and tried CPR. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely push down on his tiny chest. David just stood there, leaning against the wall, watching. I didn't see fear in his eyes. I saw something else. Something cold. The ambulance came too late. They said he was gone before they even arrived. The police called it sudden, unexplained death, but I knew in my gut it wasn't natural. I begged them to investigate. They did. For 2 weeks. Then the case was quietly closed. But I couldn't let it go. Because in one of the early reports, buried deep in the file, there was a mention of a small syringe found near Ethan's body, a syringe that disappeared before it could be tested. And now, years later, here it was in a little velvet box, handed to me by the man I'd spent a decade with. I didn't realize I had gripped the edge of the table so hard my nails were cutting into the wood. David leaned in close. "You've been looking for answers, Emily," he said. "Now you have one. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" I stared at him, my heart pounding so violently I could hear it in my ears. That's when I made a decision, one that would change both of our lives forever. The police officer's voice still echoed in my head as I sat in the cold, hard chair in the interrogation room. "Mrs. Miller, are you saying your husband gave you this as a gift?" I nodded slowly, my hands trembling as I held the small box again, its weight heavier than anything I had ever carried in my life. My throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. I could feel the eyes of the detectives on me, reading my every movement, trying to figure out if I was lying. I wasn't lying. God knows, I wish I was. Earlier that morning, after the chaos at the anniversary dinner, the police had arrived at our house. Someone, maybe one of the guests, had called them after I screamed and nearly fainted at the sight of what was inside the gift box. I didn't even have time to process before they pulled me into the station, asking questions about my son, about Ethan, and about that day, the day my whole world collapsed. But to get to that day, I had to start from the beginning. I met Ethan Miller when I was just 21. He was charming, ambitious, and had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only woman in the room. He was everything my parents warned me about: handsome, smooth-talking, and dangerously confident. But when he looked at me, I didn't care. I was in love. Or maybe I was in love with the way he made me feel, wanted, cherished, protected. 2 years later, we were married. It wasn't always perfect, but it was ours. Ethan had big dreams of starting his own construction company, and I worked as a nurse, taking extra shifts to help him save. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And then, 3 years into our marriage, our son, Daniel, was born. Daniel was my heart, my light, my everything. I still remember the way he would cling to my finger as a baby, like he knew I was the only thing keeping him safe in this world. Ethan loved him too, or at least I thought he did. But as the years passed, I began to notice changes. Ethan was gone more often. He said it was work, late-night meetings, clients calling at odd hours. I believed him at first, but sometimes his shirt would smell faintly of a perfume I didn't own, or he'd come home with his tie missing, claiming he'd left it at the office. I told myself I was overthinking it. I told myself marriage was about trust. Then came the first extreme blow. Daniel was 8 years old. He had been playing in the park with some friends while I sat on the bench, chatting with another mom. I turned my head for just a moment, and when I looked back, he was gone. Panic ripped through me. I ran, screaming his name, my voice cracking, my chest tightening with each unanswered call. I found him 2 blocks away, standing in front of a black SUV with tinted windows. The window rolled down just enough for me to see a man's eyes, cold, calculating, before the car sped away. Daniel was shaking. He wouldn't talk for hours. When I told Ethan what happened, I expected him to lose his mind with fear. Instead, he barely looked up from his phone. "It's probably nothing," he said. "Don't make a big deal out of it." That was the first time I felt truly alone in my marriage. A week later, I found out why Ethan wasn't worried. While cleaning his office, I stumbled upon a folder hidden in the back of his filing cabinet. Inside were documents, contracts, bank transfers, and something that made my blood run cold: a payment receipt from a known criminal in the city, dated just days before Daniel's disappearance scare. I confronted Ethan that night, shaking the papers in his face. "What the hell is this?" I screamed. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "You don't understand, Emily. I had no choice. I owed him money. It was just a scare tactic to remind me who I'm dealing with. You put our son in danger to settle a debt." My voice was hoarse from shouting, tears streaming down my face. "It's done," he said coldly. "Drop it." I didn't drop it. I couldn't. But before I could figure out how deep Ethan's dealings went, tragedy struck. 2 months later, Daniel was gone. The official report said it was a tragic accident, a hit and run while he was riding his bike. But something in me knew better. The bruises on his arms, the way the police avoided my questions, the cold emptiness in Ethan's eyes at the funeral, it all screamed that this wasn't just an accident. I wanted to dig. I wanted to tear apart every lie until I found the truth. But Ethan warned me, "You don't want to go down that road, Emily. For your own safety." For years, I lived in silence, carrying the weight of unanswered questions. Until last night. Last night, on our 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan handed me that small, velvet-covered box. He smiled like it was a diamond necklace or a ring. But when I opened it, my knees buckled. Inside was a tiny silver key, wrapped in the same type of ribbon Daniel's bike had on the day he died. I looked up at Ethan, my heart pounding in my ears. What is this?" His smile didn't fade. It's time you knew the truth. Before I could respond, he leaned in and whispered something that made the room spin. Something that made me realize my son's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was planned. And the worst part? It was all connected to me. My hands were still shaking in that interrogation room, the memory of Ethan's words burning into my brain. The detective leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Miller, what exactly did your husband tell you?" I opened my mouth to answer, when the door burst open. It was Ethan, and he was smiling. I couldn't sleep that night. The shadows on the bedroom walls felt longer, darker, heavier than ever before. The image of that little box kept flashing in my mind, its soft velvet lining, the cool glint of the metal inside, and the truth it carried that had shattered my entire life. I kept asking myself the same question: was I married to a murderer? The following morning, I woke up to the sound of clinking plates. Daniel was in the kitchen making breakfast like nothing had happened. He was humming. My hands trembled as I walked toward him, and I could feel the pressure in my chest building like a ticking bomb. "Good morning," he said with that warm smile that once made me feel safe. Now it felt like poison. I couldn't even reply. My voice felt stuck in my throat. My mind was too loud, replaying every possible scenario in which my husband could have been involved in my son's death. I sat at the table and watched him. Every movement he made, pouring coffee, flipping pancakes, felt calculated, like he was trying too hard to look normal. Finally, I broke. "Why was that in the box, Daniel?" I whispered. His smile faltered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned off the stove and sat across from me. "It's not what you think," he said softly, but his eyes told a different story. I slammed my hand on the table. "Our son is dead, Daniel. And you give me the very thing that caused it on our anniversary? Are you out of your mind?" His face hardened. "I thought you deserved to know the truth." I froze. "The truth?" He leaned closer, his voice low. "Ethan didn't die the way you think he did. And I'm not the only one who kept a secret from you." My stomach churned. "What are you saying?" Before he could answer, there was a sudden knock at the door, loud, aggressive, almost urgent. We both looked toward it, startled. Daniel stood up, but I reached the door first. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, rain dripping from their jackets. "Ma'am, is Daniel Brooks here?" one of them asked. My pulse skyrocketed. "Yes, he's my husband." "Why?" The taller officer's expression was cold. "We have a warrant for his arrest in connection to the death of your son." My knees almost gave out. I turned to Daniel, who didn't look shocked, just resigned. He didn't even resist when they stepped in to cuff him. As they read him his rights, he looked straight at me. "You think you know everything, Sarah. But you don't. And when you find out, you'll wish you never asked." I stood frozen in the doorway, rain blowing in, my heart in pieces. And then, one of the officers turned to me and said, "Ma'am, you might want to come down to the station too. There's something you need to see." I didn't know whether I was about to find answers or fall into a darker nightmare than I had ever imagined. The moment the handcuffs clicked around my wrists, I felt the air leave my lungs. The cold steel bit into my skin, and the officer's voice echoed in my ears. "Mrs. Carter, you are under arrest for assault and attempted murder." The room spun. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. People were staring, some in shock, others whispering behind their hands. "Attempted murder?" I gasped, my voice trembling. He killed our son. Ma'am." The officer cut me off, gripping my arm tighter. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The betrayal burned deeper than the shame of being dragged out of my own home in front of my neighbors. I caught a glimpse of Jason standing on the porch, his face pale, his lips curled in something between satisfaction and fear. He didn't even try to stop them. As they shoved me into the back of the police car, I realized the horror of it. Jason had set me up, and he had done it perfectly. The ride to the station was a blur of flashing lights and tears I refused to let fall. I couldn't let them see me break. But inside, I was already cracking apart. At the station, they fingerprinted me, took my mugshot, and threw me into a holding cell. The stench of sweat and hopelessness clung to the walls. A woman in the corner eyed me suspiciously, and I just sank onto the cold bench, hugging myself. I replayed the events in my mind over and over. The small box on our anniversary, the necklace inside, the photograph that followed, the confrontation, my shaking hands around his collar, his smirk, and then darkness. I didn't even remember hitting him that hard. When my lawyer arrived, a young man named Alex Porter, he looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was a victim or a villain. "They're saying you tried to strangle him in front of witnesses," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I leaned forward. "And they're not saying why? They're not saying what he did to me? To our son?" Alex's eyes softened just a fraction. "Right now, the case is built on his injuries and his testimony." "And his testimony," he sighed. "It's brutal. He's painting you as unstable, violent, obsessed." I felt my stomach turn. So, he kills my child, hides the truth for years, and now he gets to play the victim? Alex lowered his voice. "If we're going to win this, you need to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Every fight, every secret, every lie." And so I did. I told him about the night our son died. How Jason had been acting strange for weeks before it. How, after the funeral, I found inconsistencies in his story. The accident that didn't make sense. The phone call I overheard, the one where he whispered, "It's done." And now, years later, on our anniversary, he handed me the proof, a necklace. The same necklace our son had been wearing the night he died. A necklace Jason swore had been lost in the accident. Alex's pen froze over his notepad. "He gave you the necklace?" I nodded, like it was a gift, like he wanted to watch me break. For a long time, Alex didn't speak. Finally, he said, "Then maybe we're not just looking at a defense. Maybe we're looking at a murder case." Before I could respond, the guard banged on the door. "Time's up." I was escorted back to my cell, my mind racing. The humiliation of being in here was nothing compared to the rage burning inside me. Jason thought he'd won. He thought he'd finally crushed me. But now I had a lawyer who believed there was more to this. Now I had a chance to expose him. And when I got out, I would make sure Jason Carter regretted the day he ever placed that box in my hands. That night, as I lay on the hard cot staring at the ceiling, I heard the sound of footsteps coming toward my cell. The guard stopped, holding a sealed envelope. "This came for you," he said, sliding it through the bars. I opened it with trembling hands and froze. Inside was a single photograph. It was our son alive. And standing beside him was Jason. My heart stopped. I thought the trial would finally bring me peace. I thought standing in that courtroom, facing the man who destroyed my life, would make me feel like justice was being served. But instead, every word, every testimony was like opening a fresh wound. The prosecutor's voice rang through the courtroom. "Mrs. Dawson, please tell the jury exactly what you found in the box your husband gave you on your anniversary." I swallowed hard, my palms sweating. My eyes shifted to where Michael sat, looking calm, almost smug, as though this was just some bad inconvenience he had to sit through. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. Inside the box was the vial of poison the police confirmed killed our son. A collective gasp filled the room. I could hear someone in the back mutter, "My God." I didn't stop there. And there was also a note. His handwriting. It said, "Now you know the price of betrayal." My stomach churned remembering it. The prosecutor turned toward the jury, emphasizing every word. "And you're telling us, Mrs. Dawson, your husband wrote this note and gave it to you willingly?" "Yes," I said, my voice breaking. "On the day we were supposed to celebrate 10 years of marriage." Michael leaned back in his chair, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He didn't even try to deny it. That smug smile was still there. That was when the judge called for a recess, and I stepped out into the hallway. My knees nearly buckled as I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. The weight of the trial, of months of grief, of betrayal, it was suffocating. I thought of David, his laugh, his messy hair, how he used to hug me so tight I couldn't breathe. My baby was gone because of the man who vowed to protect us. And the worst part? He had done it with a twisted kind of pride. When the recess ended, the defense started their game. They painted me as a bitter wife. They claimed I had imagined Michael's involvement because of our failing marriage. They even brought up private arguments, trying to make me look unstable, emotional, a mother too broken to be trusted. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Every word they spoke was like a slap. And Michael, he just sat there, letting them drag me through the mud, not once showing remorse. Then came the witness I hadn't expected, Emily. The same Emily who had been our family friend. The woman I had trusted with our son when I was away. When she walked into the courtroom, my heart stopped. She was pregnant. Michael looked at her the same way he used to look at me, with that mix of charm and possession. The prosecutor's questions revealed everything. Emily had been having an affair with my husband for over 2 years. She admitted, in a soft voice, that Michael told her David wasn't part of their future. That's when my vision blurred. The words barely registered. Not part of their future. My son was an inconvenience, so they removed him. I wanted to leap across the room, to tear into both of them, to scream until the walls shook. But I sat still, gripping the edge of my seat, so tightly my nails dug into the wood. By the time court adjourned for the day, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making them pay in ways the law never could. I left the courthouse that evening with something burning inside me. Something darker than grief, sharper than pain. The plan started forming that very night. But I didn't know that my first step toward revenge would put me face to face with someone who had been hiding a secret of their own. A secret that could change everything. And that's when the knock came at my door. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. Why? The word trembled out of me like it had been trapped in my throat for years. Why did you keep this from me? Why would you? His lips pressed into a thin line. Because I knew if I told you the truth, you'd never forgive me. The box still sat between us, its cruel contents glinting under the warm light of our living room, a light that now felt like a spotlight exposing every lie he had ever told me. I picked it up again, my fingers trembling, and held it out to him. So, you thought hiding it was better? Letting me believe it was an accident? Letting me cry myself to sleep every night thinking it was nobody's fault? His eyes darted away. I didn't mean for him to die. But you did something that made it happen. I snapped, my voice breaking. You gambled with our son's life, and you lost. He exhaled, his face pale. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I only took the money from the charity fund for a short while. I thought I could put it back before anyone noticed. But then the payment for the experimental treatment got delayed, and by the time I had the money again, his voice trailed off. I covered my mouth, fighting the urge to scream. This wasn't just a bad decision. This was betrayal carved deep into my bones. You took his treatment money to cover your gambling debts? I was going to win it back, he shouted suddenly, as if yelling would make his excuse sound less pathetic. I stepped back. My hands were cold, my knees shaking, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly calm. You didn't just kill my son, Michael, I said slowly. You killed the part of me that loved you. His face twisted. You think you're perfect? You think you've never made mistakes. Not mistakes that cost my child his life, I said, my voice like ice. That night, I packed a small bag, not for me, but for evidence. The box, the receipts, the gambling slips I had found in his office drawer months before, even the text messages he didn't think I knew about. I scanned every piece, stored them in a cloud folder under a new email address, and backed them up to a flash drive. By morning, I was gone. I didn't go to my sisters, didn't go to my parents. I went straight to the district attorney's office. My story spilled out like venom I had been holding for years, and the DA's eyes darkened as he listened. If what you're saying is true, he said, this isn't just fraud. It's negligent homicide. The next week was a blur. Detectives came to my home. I replayed that night, that moment I opened the box, over and over. Each time it cut deeper, but each time I reminded myself he would not get away with this. The day they came for him, I was there. He was leaving his office when the officers stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Our eyes met across the parking lot. His face went white. "You think you've won?" he shouted as they pulled him toward the car. "You think this will bring him back?" "No," I said quietly. "But it will make sure you can't destroy anyone else." The trial was brutal. His lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, a tragic accident caused by financial desperation. But the prosecution had the paper trail. The jury saw through every crocodile tear he tried to produce. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I felt not joy, not relief, just a hollow ache where love used to be. Months later, I visited our son's grave. The air was cool, the leaves rustling softly above me. I knelt down and placed a small toy car on the grass, his favorite, the one he used to carry everywhere. "I did it, baby," I whispered. "I made sure he can't hurt anyone else." As I walked away, I realized something. Revenge didn't heal me. It didn't erase the nights I woke up crying or the empty chair at the dinner table. But it gave me something else, the power to close a chapter one thought would haunt me forever. And for now, that was enough.